All right, good afternoon. I'm Sheriff John Rutherford of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and I'm joined here today by a Special Agent in charge of the Jacksonville region for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Special Agent Dominic Pate. Also, we have next to him John Pesnichak, who is the Supervisory Special Agent of the Jacksonville Office of the IRS, and Special Agent in charge of the U.S. Secret Service, Mr. Lee Fields. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And we are here to discuss Operation Reveal the Deal. But first, I'm going to let Special Agent Dominic Pate give you a heads up.
At this time, a major press conference is being held in Orlando at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Office concerning Operation Reveal the Deal. In attendance at the conference is Attorney General Pam Bondi, Commissioner of FDLE Gerald Bailey, U.S. Attorney Bobby O'Neill, and other agency executives that were instrumental in bringing this investigation to the results of today's press conference. Clearly, this was a coordinated effort involving federal, state, county, and local law enforcement agencies. Commencing yesterday and continuing today, arrests and search warrants involving 49 illegal gambling centers in 23 Florida counties were executed. Sure.
Thank you. Give you an idea how we got here. In 2007, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office began an investigation of a potential criminal enterprise. By September of 2008, the investigation had uncovered potential illegal activity on the part of Patrolman Nelson Cuba, who at that time was the FOP president. By 2010, it became clear that Nelson Cuba was not part of the original enterprise under investigation, but was possibly tied to a second separate criminal enterprise with multiple entities that appeared to be shell companies. Further investigation indicated that at least some of these shell companies were affiliates of Allied Veterans of the World. At that time, I ordered a separate investigation into the activities of Patrolman Nelson Cuba, Patrolman Robert Freitas, the FOP Foundation, and Allied Veterans of the World and its affiliates. During that investigation, we began to subpoena financial documents of various companies and individuals. During the course of that inquiry, in July of 2010, we were contacted by an assistant U.S. attorney who alerted us that similar investigations were being conducted by the U.S. Secret Service and by the sheriff's offices in Seminole and Volusia counties. We quickly met with the other law enforcement teams and developed a merged investigation into the activities that have resulted in yesterday's arrest and today's announcements. As we began to compare notes, we all began to understand the following. The JSO had a fairly well-developed money laundering and criminal enterprise investigation. The two counties, Seminole and Volusia, those sheriff's offices had a well-developed gambling and enterprise investigation. The Internal Revenue Service and U.S. Secret Service, who were already working with those two counties, had critically important assets. Number one, the expertise to investigate highly technical financial records among banking locations in dozens of companies. The geographic reach to conduct multiple multi-jurisdictional and multi-state investigations. They also have the power of the federal law enforcement. Potential perpetrators can lie to local authorities, but if they lie to federal officers, they go to jail. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the Statewide Prosecutor's Office have coordinated with the subpoenas, search warrants, seizures, arrest warrants, and other critical parts of the machinery of that investigation. A joint federal, state, and local investigation uncovered more than $300 million in proceeds from the gambling centers, with only 2% of the proceeds going to charitable organizations. The persons arrested yesterday participated in a complex money laundering scheme designed to hide the gambling proceeds and deceive the public and government. Charges include racketeering and influence corrupt organizations, commonly referred to as RICO, money laundering, keeping of gambling houses, slot machines, and lottery. And to give you an idea here, this board shows the scope of the investigation. We have 6 states, 23 Florida counties, 57 state arrest warrants, and 53 federal search warrants. And I'll let Special Agent Dominic Pate refer to the rest of that.
This phase of the investigation has focused on the illegal gambling centers operating as allied veterans of the world. The 3-year investigation has resulted in the arrest and seizures of property for the purpose of dismantling of an elaborate and sophisticated $300 million enterprise involving 6 states, 23 Florida counties. We have 57 arrest warrants. We have in custody 49 of those subjects. We served 53 search warrants. We seized 44 vehicles/vessels. We froze and or seized 260 bank accounts with a number of $64.7 million seized as of this press conference. We utilized at least 500 law enforcement officers so far in this investigation. This law enforcement effort could not have happened without the team effort. We will also be issuing out a press release with a lot of the facts and figures, but also there's a website on there, www.seminolesheriff.org, which will have charging affidavits. This is just not the first wave of our investigation. These gambling centers were purportedly operated for charitable purposes. But our investigation suggests the premise of charity is a lie. But our investigation suggests that this premise of charity is not a lie, but in fact a violation on our citizens of Florida. And it's a lie to our dedicated veterans who have protected our country because little money has made it to the charities. Our investigators believe that the reality is that each gambling center is operated by owners, for-profit companies, who funneled the bulk of money to the management of organization and software operators, not charities. Sheriff?
Thank you. And the key conspirators, there are 4 key conspirators in this, covering these 6 states, and you can see them here. They are going clockwise. Mr. Kelly Mathis, who was the attorney, Mr. Chase Burns, who runs International Internet Technologies in Oklahoma. He received $63 million. Mr. Mathis, $6 million. Allied Veterans of the World, we have Jerry Bass, who is the current national commander, and Johnny Duncan, who is the former national commander, and they have received $30 million to Allied Veterans of the World, and only $5 million, almost 6, 5.8, has actually gone to charitable organizations. Interestingly, our investigation started here with Officer Cuba and Freitas, and this is where we're looking at the money laundering aspect, and then of course Seminole and Volusia counties, we're looking at the gambling aspect, and that's when our investigations ran together. Now, as I mentioned, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, to give you a breakdown of that in a pie chart, this is the $194 million that went back to for-profit companies. This is where the shell operations were taking place, and this is where the gambling was being run from. And you can see only 2% of this $300 million was actually sent back to charitable organizations. The Sheriff's Office has a well-documented history of aggressively investigating any evidence of criminal wrongdoing, whether in commerce, government, or policing, no matter who is involved, especially within the JSO. It is obvious to everyone that those charged in the Jacksonville area included Patrolman Nelson Cuba and Patrolman Robert Freitas. Investigating a police officer is never a happy event for us, but it is critical to our mission, to public safety, and to public confidence in their police, that we ensure our officers obey the law. Let me be clear. this investigation was not about their policing activities, but about their alleged criminal activities. Nobody's above the law. If we get evidence, we go after it. We always have. And nobody gets a pass. With that, other questions?
Sheriff, you say you started investigating Mr. Kuba, Mr. Freitas in 2008. In that time, you've negotiated union contracts with him. You've had a lot of dealings with him. This has been almost 5 years. And at the same time, we have more of these internet facilities in Duval County than any other county in Florida. Do you feel JSO did enough during that time?
Absolutely. We were aggressively going after this. As you can imagine, to get money laundering and structuring charges against individuals, you have to show patterns. Those patterns take time to develop. And it takes a lot of work by local, state, and federal. And you can't jump too soon, or some of these other principles may have never been charged, and evidence would have been destroyed.
One follow-up question. Mason Salome and Michael Riles, who are both listed in these arrest dockets, we checked with the Supervisor of Elections Office, listed as both in 2010 donating $500 each to your re-election campaign. Can you respond
Correct.
to that, Sheriff?
Yes, I received campaign contributions from this organization. Actually, didn't want to tip them off. We take, I knew that there were issues, but I was not going to refuse it since we couldn't. It would make them suspicious.
What's the status of Kuba and Freitas as far as JSO is concerned now? What's the status with the agency?
Both officers have chosen to take a voluntary leave without pay.
We notice up on this board I see yachts and fancy cars. Is there a reason they're up there? Are they part of this?
Yes, I believe they are.
Yes.
Can you speak to what those are? Are those something these gentlemen were buying?
There's all sorts of vehicles and yachts. There's at least a 110-foot yacht that we're working on season down in South Florida. Numerous type of vehicles, Maserati. This organization clearly liked to spend money on themselves. I don't have the final list of those things, but yes, a lot of high-end. I know there was at least a Maserati. I know that there was other high-end equipment and boats. And we are still in the process of getting our hands on some of that stuff. So we're not going to list whatever else is out there because we're still working on those seizures.
Another question for you. The First District search warrant papers list Seminole County as the initiator of this whole investigation. I mean, is there any way to tell who was the first on board to kind of look into this?
I think what you had, like the sheriff said, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was working. They were working at the same time. At some point, they merged. To say who's first, I don't know that we could even decide. It was probably about the same time. The bottom line, though, is the team effort and the merger has made this case one of the top cases that this state has seen in a very, very long time.
Mr. Pape, is it possible that any of these people who have been arrested did not know this was illegal? Because these are things that are operational on city streets and they're operational. Did they not know that collecting this money is wrong?
That's going to be for the courts and other things to decide. The bottom line is our investigation is continuing. They clearly have been arrested.
Were Mr. Kuba and Mr. Freitas ever questioned by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office or investigators, and if so, to what extent?
I can't answer that right now. It was a joint investigation, and most of it obviously was documenting the financial records, establishing the structuring that was going on for the money laundering. So I don't want to get into the particulars of the investigation at this
Can
time.
you elaborate a little bit more on what first tipped you off then? What first made you aware?
Well, as I mentioned, we were actually looking at another criminal enterprise. And through these shell companies, it became clear that there was some potential criminal wrongdoing. We thought originally with the first criminal enterprise, but then we realized that this was completely separate, and that's when it rolled into also Robert Freitas and Officer Freitas and Allied Veterans and their affiliates.
Where will this be prosecuted? Do we determine that yet?
I think what you're going to see is probably more than probably Seminole County and or the federal district or the middle district. I mean, there's going to be both state and federal charges that will still be coming. So again, I think it'll be the middle district, at least at this point.
Yeah, you haven't addressed, we're going after racketeering, money laundering, gambling. Tax evasion, is that on the back burner or is that being developed as well?
I can tell you that the case is ongoing. We are going to exhaust all possible state and federal laws to dismantle this whole organization. Okay, so there is nothing going to be left on the table, like the sheriff said. Not a pass, nothing left on the table.
Are Mr. Freitas and Mr. Cuba the only members of the Sheriff's Office under investigation?
Yes.
Do you foresee any more local arrests on the First Coast?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. There's still is ongoing. There'll be more to come. We're not going to get into those other ones. There's at least 8 people that are still out. There's at least 2 in Florida that we're looking for, and the rest are out of state. But this case is just beginning. There's a lot of money that changed hands, and when you have that volume of money, sometimes people do bad things. So clearly, we're not going away. This is just, as they say, the tip of the iceberg with continuance to come.
Are those 2 from Jacksonville? Have their names been released?
No, they're not from Jacksonville. They're from other parts of Florida. And the 2 that we have from Florida that we have not selected yet or found is Kerry Hardy and Tariq Wahid. And the other 2 are from Georgia, and we have 4 from South Carolina still in the process of trying to capture.
Sheriff, I don't know if you can speak to this, but this obviously doesn't involve the police union, but their former president and vice president. Does this affect at all their negotiations with you or the city as far as contracts and all those ongoing processes?
No, not at all. In fact, Steve Amos is a patrolman who was second vice president, and he has now been put on special duty to run as president of the FOP, I understand. You'd have to ask the union about the rest of that.
Should anyone be concerned that the head of our police union representing our officers have been arrested, involved in criminal activity? Can you say any reassuring words to the public about your sheriff's office?
Yes, we arrested them.
Is there going to be...
That means nobody gets a pass. So you got to know, if we thought there was anything going on, we would run it to the ground and we'd put them in jail. We don't tolerate illegal activity.
Are the FOP and the FOP Foundation still under investigation for this?
I really don't want to talk about the future of the investigation.
Sheriff, you've been a long-time critic of online casino gambling. Do you see this in any way as a vindication of your position, which has not always been popular with the state legislature and others in the state?
You know, that's for others to decide. I wouldn't comment on that.
Given that it was the head of the union, I mean, is JSO or any agency going to be looking at all into the books of the union and any financial dealings there that were involving Cuba?
The records that have been seized, yes, they will be going into all of those accounts that we have seized, that we believe have touched this criminal enterprise.
And can you say whether there are specifically FOP records that have possibly touched the investigation?
Well, it's public record that the FOP Inc., which was an account that the only signature on that was Nelson Cuba, and the FOP Foundation have both been frozen.
I've been asked by numerous customers of these facilities, am I in trouble? Is anyone who's went to these places, do they have to worry about any sort of criminal problems?
No, they don't.
Anything else? We'll leave the boards up.
All right, thank you.